this is how people function in the world. This is how they purchase things online. So this is not weird if you've already put the music stuff in front of it and they're already, now you're shifting them from thinking as a fan to also thinking as a shopper, which is a thing that they're used to doing, you know? So I love that too. This, again, it's full spectrum, right? We're looking at how it's presented in the first verbiage and then how we follow up with good e-commerce practice, which is done all over the world with all kinds of industries. So
you are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I am your co-host, Corrin, and with me is Jack. How's it going today, Jack?
It is going wonderful. It's just a great week over here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to when it's sunny most days. It's still spring, you know?
Yeah.
If I'm going to be stuck inside, I want to at least be able to feel that the outside is accessible and nice.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point. I'm getting to that point in this month, in the season where I just want to be basking in the sun constantly. So I hear you.
Right. The cabin fever is real.
Yep.
Well, today we wanted to come and talk to you. You know, obviously last week we talked a lot about benchmarks and how to, you know, kind of audit what's going on with your ads or campaigns. And then the pivots, right? And, you know, one thing that we heard a lot of feedback about is the Ultimate Album Launch, which is a strategy that we have available in the Indie Pro training section. And the Ultimate Album Launch is a great way to kind of move people through the buddy system. But at the same time, it doesn't work for everyone, right? And so we wanted to come into this episode thinking about, okay, if you're not going to do the Ultimate Album Launch, or if you've tried that and it didn't work for your brand, what are the other kinds of launches that we can do and how do we prepare for those, right? So I'm going to kind of let Jack kick us off here because I know that he has done so many different types of campaigns and has prepped so many different kinds of campaigns for our clients at IndieX. So Jack, where do you want to start with this? What do you think is a good kicking off point?
Yeah, sure. So I figured that it might be cool to talk about some of these ideas of like alternate launches that I've seen artists do and I've helped artists with at the IndieX agency. So I thought that might be a cool place to kind of dive in. And specifically, a big question that we get a lot of is, well, how do I launch singles? You know, that's a huge question that we get. And I'm actually in the middle of doing a single launch right now with one of our artists. So I figured that might be a good kind of diving off point into talking about how you might consider launching a single, how you make it something more experiential and holistic and sort of, you know, 360 in how you're talking to your fan base and how you're getting the music out there. So I figured we could start there.
I'm down to start there because I'm in the process. I now have 4 of my 20 singles out. And I know that for me, the first 2 singles came out 2 weeks apart. Well, it was single 2 weeks, second single 2 weeks, and then 3-4 came out on the same day on May 15th. And I know that for me, like this process, like the process of releasing 3 singles within, you know, a total of 4 weeks has been like, whoa. And I know that there might be some ways that I could streamline this, or maybe some things that Jack will bring up that I haven't considered. So I'm actually really stoked to pick your brain as much as anyone listening.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm psyched to dive into it, and I know it's been fun to kind of watch your progress with the singles that you've been releasing and this whole longer term record project that you've been putting out there. So I'd definitely be, you know, I'd love for us to dive into that a little bit too on this episode. I think that it would be cool to talk about that as well.
Yeah, sure. There are probably singles campaigns, you know, there are one-off singles, right? There are plenty of artists who aren't releasing in this like, you know, kind of repeated fashion in the way that I am, where it's like, you know, I'm releasing these singles and then that culminates to an album and then it's all out. I know that plenty of artists just release singles without the intention of putting them on an album or without the intention of releasing them all close together like this. So what do you think, where do you want to start, Jack? What's the first one that you'd like to highlight for us?
Yeah, sure. So let's dive into to this campaign that I'm kind of in the middle of running right now, since it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
One of the bands that we work with at IndieX has a string of singles that they're going to be releasing leading up to likely an album release in November. It's looking like the record is going to drop. It was originally going to be September, but with things related to the coronavirus pandemic and all of that and some touring hiccups that came about, things are kind of getting shuffled around. Not important to this, not important at all to this conversation.
Well, it's relevant.
But this is the first single off the record that they're putting out there. So they said, hey, throughout the month of May, it is our band's birthday month. It is, we want to be dropping this single. We have a really cool music video concept planned for it. The music video is actually, it's like a Zoom style kind of music video, kind of fitting with everything that's going on in the world right now. So they were like, okay, how can we kind of look at this single launch as a 360 kind of picture, and what can we do to, kind of activate people at all stages of the buddy system with it, or as many as possible, rather. So what we did was we sort of planned strategy around that idea of looking at different things that we can use to get fans engaged and excited throughout the course of a month, rather than, a short kind of pre-save window and that being it, and then the song drops and then you just kind of yell it out to the world. Right. We were like, how can we actually get people excited? So because it's still going on, there are a few stages to this campaign that we're running, and the first started with a pre-save kind of window in the 2 weeks leading up to the single release, which I believe was on the 1st or 2nd of May. I can't remember the exact date. I know it was a Friday, but the dates have escaped me at this point. But we did a short kind of pre-order window where we were tapping into a variety of traffic sources. And this is one thing that I wanted to bring up, is when you do any kind of launch campaign, whether it's an album, whether it's a single or an EP, you should be evaluating what your traffic sources are. And for this band, we had a few to work with. We have a large warm audience on Facebook and Instagram that we can retarget. They have a very big email list of around 15,000 people. Yeah, and they have a Facebook group with, I think it has like 20,000 people in it. And along with that, they also have a pretty solid customer list, and they also have a list of fans who are part of a membership service. So you can see here, we've kind of got like varying...
that sounds perfect.
Yeah, really dope, varying layers of warmth.
Right.
For their fan base. So we had a lot to work with. So we said, okay, how can we activate people at these various levels? So for their list and the people that engage with them, on a regular basis, their Facebook group, their customers, their subscriber list, we went to those people and, we let them know about 2 weeks in advance that they were going to be dropping the single, and we gave them, a pre-save link. We also ran a short little teaser of the music video with that pre-save link as kind of like a warm audience ad on Facebook, just targeting their whole warm audience to drive pre-saves. So that was kind of our first step in the pre-launch phase of this single. And that went really well. They got a lot of people pre-saving the song, getting hyped up about it, a lot of engagement going on around the video, especially with, like I said, it being kind of like a Zoom style video of them playing the song. Because we just used a snippet, their fans were like, oh, this looks so cool. Like, this looks sick. It's so relevant to everything going on in my life right now. So there was a lot of buzz about that. So then on the actual day of release, we premiered the video on Facebook, actually using the premiere function. So the post was scheduled the music video was scheduled as a post, as a premiere, so that fans could see it ahead of time, sort of engage with it. There was, a good amount of social proof before we even launched it. And then we ran a fan finder campaign on that music video right then and there. Right when it was ready to launch, we turned on fan finder to both cold and warm audiences. So we were kind of working both the education and the nurturing stages of the buddy system, as well as the intro stage of the buddy system to generate new listeners for the song.
Yeah, nice. And I think that's something that a lot of us don't think about, right? Like we think about either the cold audience or the warm audience. And sometimes that can be, it's limiting, right? Because content is content, and so utilizing these things for, your warm audience. In fact, I know that in the past, I have even told my peeps like, hey, if you're on my mailing list, you'll be able to see the video early. And so I will actually like post an ad that is like targeting my email list, right? And then I send them a link to that post. So what that does is it generates all of this warm traffic and all this social proof on it. And then I send it to cold audiences, So there's a few ways that you can and if you are feeding content to your warm audience as well as a cold audience, you are likely to get some of that engagement, which just helps other people see like, oh yeah, this is cool. I'm validating other people think it's cool. So therefore I can also, So I think that's one thing. We focus a lot on cold traffic, especially with video view campaigns, but it definitely, you got to think about that warm audience as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned that because the next kind of pieces of this puzzle were really focused on their warm audience.
Beautiful.
So while we kicked off ad campaigns for both cold and warm audiences to kind of just keep the awareness around this single going, we also kicked off a traffic ad campaign on the video as well, pointing people to like a bridge page link where they could select their streaming service of choice. So we were sending people over to Apple Music and to Spotify. So kind of getting a variance of audiences seeing the song in different places, because that was part of the band's objective as well, as they wanted to work the streaming angle, so we worked that in. Pretty cool. But meanwhile, once that was kind of dialed in and humming, what we moved to next was we actually launched about a week later, we launched an exclusive t-shirt for the single with the single art. And the single art is actually pretty cool. It's like a seatbelt kind of logo without giving away too much detail and kind of blowing up the band's spot here. It's a cool kind of seatbelt logo. It looks like the person's like strapped into the shirt, and we launched that a week later to their customer list, to their subscriber list, and to their warm audiences with some ads as well. And they printed out 50 of those shirts and just said, hey, these are, we've got 50 of these to celebrate the release of the song. Once they're gone. But to sweeten this up a little bit, we're shipping them out for free. We're marking them down 25%. And if you want to get one, you can get one. And they've been selling really, really fast. The fans have just been eating them up.
Yeah.
So there's kind of been an activation angle to this as well in the strategy to take the people who either are existing customers and getting them to buy something again, and support the band in that way, kind of in celebration of, this release. And also we're picking up customers that have, first-time customers, people that haven't bought before. With a product that is timely. They're seeing the song, they're listening to it, they're engaging with the video. The band is super active with going live. They do a Tuesday live stream. They also go live on Thursdays pretty often. So they've been kind of just like hanging out with their fans, talking about it, hearing what they think about. So there's kind of been this big experience going on just around the release of a single, which can be pretty cool. So we dropped that shirt. There were also some other little elements in there to the actual sales campaign. We included some upsell opportunities for fans that wanted to pick up something else. So a secondary shirt and also a physical copy of their previous record, just kind of installed as order bumps and upsells into their store, which has been going well. Also, just to help kind of bump up the revenue there. So that's been great. That's that was kind of like the third angle of this launch. And then we are also in the middle, about a week later, we launched another leg of this single release where the band wanted to do some list building and just, more opportunities to get their fans excited. So we ran a giveaway, and the giveaway was themed around, again, the celebration of the band's single release, their birthday month. And what they were giving away is actually a virtual happy hour with them, because we had done a giveaway previously for some signed merch. So we wanted to take a different angle, and we were like, oh, well, people are doing virtual happy hours with their friends right now. Like, let's give them the opportunity to do a virtual happy hour with you guys. And so we've been running traffic we've actually been using Viper.io for our giveaway. If you're not familiar with Viper is a viral contest platform, and it's pretty sweet what you can do with it. So we've been running signups to that to build up the band's list and also just get their fans activated. There are some bonus actions that they can take in there just to get them, win them extra points, and extra actions that they can take, things like saving the song on Spotify, adding it to a playlist, following the band, things like that. So people are getting pretty activated in that sense as well. So that's kind of the third. Yeah, so that's kind of the third tier of this campaign. And then the fourth which will launch. Yeah, there's a fourth.
Yeah, there's a fourth. So, not to cut you off, but I think that really illustrates the power of a contest, right? Like, yeah. Because a single in and of itself, and as Jack is kind of summating all of this and is about to tell us the fourth phase, you can see that, like, this is not just, hey, there's a single, and you have to assume that you can't just do that. You can't just be like, oh, there's a single, To be honest, like, in my stuff, I was running so far behind with all of the things I was trying to do for my stuff. The first single kind of went out a little bit not romantically, right? It didn't have this kind of stuff built around it, and it didn't do great, right? Like, not shocking. Quarantine hit, so I ended up having a visualizer instead of an actual video, and like, I just, I didn't push myself creatively, and I think I really took for granted. I'm like, well, my audience is great, they'll go listen. Like, no, there wasn't much to do about it, right? And so, then I was like, all right, I'm going to learn my lesson. So I started running a contest, not through Viper. Oh, although if you are interested in Viper, we do have an indie deal for our Indie Pro members that sends you to Viper. And I'm not sure what the discount is, but there's a discount for that. So discounts are good. But I'm actually using TuneSpeak, and I just launched that as of today, 5 days ago. And in that period of time, I've never really pushed followers on Spotify. That's never really been a thing for me. But following me on Spotify is one of the things that they can do. And I've garnered 87 follows and over 100 mailing list subscriptions from this contest since it launched on Friday. So, and I haven't really pushed the contest yet. Like, I posted it organically on socials and that's it. I got 63, I'm like looking at my dashboard for it. I got 63 YouTube subscriptions, 226 YouTube video views, 500 Spotify song plays, 100 new visitors on my website. And I've got a poll in there. I got 60 new followers on Twitter. Like, these are the things that you can generate when you have a contest that is, something that you can actually track, and that there are, actions that they can take that, participants feel like they're involved in it, right? So I think that that's one way that you shouldn't just think about what can I do to push the single. You should also think about how can the single push these other things, because streams of that single are not in and of themselves really worth a whole lot, right? So I think that's something that you're illustrating really well, Jack, is that, we want people to go listen to the music, and we think about music as the product, right? And so the goal always ends with the music, but at the same time, like, there are other things that you want to happen, and you should be using the music to push those in the same way that you use those things to push the music. So I think what you've done is a really well-rounded kind of illustration of that point.
Yeah, it's a really synergistic relationship, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all about, like, I just want people to listen to the song. You can make it about bigger, or not necessarily bigger, but you can make it about broader goals than that, which will move you forward in your career as a whole, rather than taking a kind of a narrow vision sort of approach to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's something that, I really want indies to take away from what you've built, is that we always have to think about this as a cycle, right? In the same way that we think about the buddy system, it's the cycle that always goes back to nurturing. In the same way, like the music feeds the promotion feeds the music, all of the above sources your revenue for merchandise or, other types of income streams like a membership, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think you've done a great job. All right, now I'll shut up so you can tell me phase 4.
Phase 4 is much simpler. So it doesn't take much explanation. But what the band also wanted to do is, and this was kind of a tail end tack on, if I'm being honest, just as we've been going through the process of having this single out into the world, we were like, oh, what other ways can we make this cool? And we realized that Memorial Day weekend was coming up, and we were like, oh, well, let's run a sales promo. We've already got, the limited edition t-shirts, which are about to sell out. So let's kind of pivot that into our last chance sort of push for those shirts, and say, okay, like we want to make sure that people get, something exciting, and that people who didn't get to take part in grabbing a shirt or something like that, or maybe the shirt just wasn't for them, maybe they don't dig band shirts, give them the opportunity to pick up something that they might like. So we were like, all right, let's run a Memorial Day sales promo. So throughout the rest of May, what we're doing is we're kind of testing the water with a few different things in their store. For a while, we've been kind of discussing back and forth about the prospect of running just consistent free shipping in the band's store, period. And, we limited it down to saying like, well, let's see if that really moves the needle at all by testing it for a short period of time. So what we're doing is we're running a Memorial Day sale, 15% off the whole store, anything that somebody might want, and any order over 25 gets free shipping. So we're kind of baking in a little bit of ascension opportunity there, or if not ascension, just upping the order value in the store. So we're going to launch that on, I believe we're going to launch it on Friday of this week, which will be past by the time that this episode is out. But it should be really interesting to see how we can kind of keep the ball rolling here. So that's the kind of the final phase of this month's single release.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I think this too really illustrates, like, if you listen, especially if I hadn't interrupted, if you listen to Jack talk phase 1 through phase 4, like the front end is very, is the stuff that musicians are mostly comfortable with already, right? Which is like, oh, I put out this video and then I tell people about it and then I tell them about the song. And then, maybe there's a shirt that goes with it. And like, once you get past that though, and you listen more to what Jack's saying, like especially phase 4, right? Jack is not thinking, like a standard musician at that point, right? That's not typically a musician thought, like, oh, there's a Memorial Day weekend coming up. Everybody runs sales on Memorial Day weekend. So we're going to do that. And we're going to offer free shipping over this amount. You can really start to hear how they have now shifted their focus in our incorporating stuff that is more, standard e-com. And that's okay when you've done all of this in front of it. Like when indies are like, oh, it's so salesy. It's like, well, here's the thing. This is how people function in the world. This is how they purchase things online. So this is not weird if you've already put the music stuff in front of it and they're already, now you're shifting them from thinking as a fan to also thinking as a shopper, which is a thing that they're used to doing, So I love that too. This, again, it's full spectrum, right? We're looking at how it's presented in the first verbiage and then how we follow up with good e-commerce practice, which is done all over the world with all kinds of industries. So I think that's a really cool sum up.
Totally. That's such a good point. And, it's interesting how you mention it's important to pre-frame people with, the music has been put in front of them. But I think in addition to that, they've been presented with offers kind of all throughout this this launch period. But it just hasn't been sales offers. For example, the fans were presented with an offer to win something, or some things. In this case, there were actually a couple secondary prizes that I didn't mention, not as important. But they were made offers to, take an action in exchange for a chance to win. They were made a specific limited edition kind of offer that was related to the single. So then, the fans have been exposed at this point to the band making offers to them, to offering them things of value in exchange for other things of value. And when you do that, it doesn't become weird or salesy anymore. It's not out of the sphere of normal of that relationship. And I think that that's really important. It's kind of like the idea of, you put the frog in the water and you turn up the heat. It's kind of like that.
What?
Yeah, you're warming up.
People say that's horrible.
Wait, you've never heard that? You've never heard that analogy before?
No.
If you throw a frog in boiling water, it'll jump right out. But if you put it in, lukewarm water and turn up the heat, it will just boil.
Oh my gosh, no. That's so terrible. That's worse than killing two birds with one stone. I can't even bring myself to use that turn of phrase. Oh my gosh. Jack, I never knew what a dark soul you are. You're so emo.
As we talk about boiling your fans with offers.
That's amazing. I love it.
These are all the things that you can be thinking about.
Right, exactly. I'm so sorry. That really just took me off guard.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, I think that I love that you started off with that example because it's so well-rounded, right? So, but I think that's the thing. You really have to let, we talk about best practices all the time, and we talk about how certain things in the e-com world don't make sense, right? Like we just said this 1 or 2 episodes ago. We were like, you can't just put a pop-up on your site and be like, enter your, email so that you can get a 10% discount. That's not what people are looking for if they're going to your music site necessarily, right? Because that's a standard e-com practice. And I do it every time I go to buy anything. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I'll put in an email that I haven't already given you so I can get 10% off, But when it comes to, free shipping over this amount, or, bundle these things together, right? Those are more e-com kind of discussions. And, being able to figure out where those make sense, and where people have maybe shifted how they're experiencing something or what they're used to experiencing in that moment. When they're used to consuming an artist, they're thinking like a music fan. But eventually, if you warm them up enough and they get to your store, chances are there's a different kind of conversation happening there, right? You're not going to send people, or you shouldn't be sending people to your store who aren't already like, yeah, I'm in, like, show me your wares, So, I think that's a really good illustration of all the way around.
Definitely, yeah. I think what indies can take away from this, or hopefully what you guys take away from this, is just some things that you could be doing when it comes to, an alternative kind of launch like a single. And you don't have to package all of these things into each and every single. I know, like, a question that might come to my mind if I was an artist listening to this is, well, I'm dropping a single every month. Does that mean I have to do all of those things for every one of them? No, definitely not.
But if you can win.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. If you've got the wherewithal to do it, and you've got the audience that that you can work with to do those sorts of things, by all means,
put a shirt of the month machine on that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. But it's definitely not necessary. And if your fans have never experienced something like that before, and you don't have a lot of customers, it's not necessarily going to make sense for you to all of a sudden just smack them in the face with 25 new pieces of merch over the next several months,
Right, yeah.
They're going to be like, whoa, what's this, right? You haven't, gotten them to the point where that's normal. And so again, that's where we're shifting more into how we market music and how that's different in the world. And then once they get more warmed up, you can feel free to open up some of that e-com function, because there's enough people there and they know you well enough that they're just going to feel like, oh yeah, this is just like when I go to buy from Amazon or whatever. So, yeah, I think you have to, again, we're talking a lot about critical thinking this month, but that's one of those things where there's not a benchmark. There's not a certain number of orders. There's not like a place when right? You just have to critically think about it and see when there are people who are looking for more and messaging you, asking for more. That's when you can start assuming that it's time to pivot to that kind of structure.
Yeah, exactly. It's all really contextual. And I think something
which is so frustrating. No indie wants that.
No one wants to hear contextual, and no one wants to hear test, which is what I was going to say next is all of this whole campaign structure, if I'm being totally honest, when building it with the band, we said, okay, we're going to try these things and see how they go. We knew based on previous campaigns that we've run with them kind of separately, that all of these puzzle pieces work well, but stringing them together into one kind of release campaign was a new thing for us to do with them. So we said, we're going to test this with your fan base and see how it goes. If they like it, it's something that we could do again. So
right.
That's, it's context and testing. And I want to make that kind of clear to be like, yeah, this isn't something that you can just plug in and say, it's definitely going to work for me, because even with the artists that it is working with, we're putting it out there at the very beginning as saying, this is something that we're trying. The puzzle pieces are there, but putting them together is a big old test.
Yeah. And I know some people are probably thinking, what, they have 15,000 people and like they only ordered 50 shirts, and they didn't sell out of them instantly. I mean, I think that sets a really good kind of perspective on this, right? Which is that a lot of people assume like, oh, if you have 15,000 people on a mailing list and you put 50 shirts up for sale, they're just going to sell out instantly. And it's like, that's not necessarily the case, right? And that doesn't mean that it's not wildly successful, right?
Right.
It could be about just seeing, like, getting the offer to the people at the right time with something that they want. And so, maybe that cover design just isn't the thing that dude who would have bought a shirt, he just didn't want that design right now, So, but I think it shows like the amount of volume you really need to have on that mailing list, because you can't, if you've got 600 people and you're thinking, oh, well, I'd like to convert 10% of my mailing list to purchasers. It doesn't mean that it's the right time for them to purchase, right? And the mailing list, depending on how long that's accumulated, you can't assume that as soon as you put something out, people are it's just going to sell out because you want it to, So I think that the amount of work that went into this, and especially like the testing of it, is just it's a good reality check for a lot of people, I think, who have yet to hit that amount of warmth. I know that the band you're talking about is freaking incredible and their fan base is great. And like you said, they got a mailing list, they got a membership. They have all the things, And so even at that point, Jack is still testing for them. Right. So you never grow out of that. And you always just follow suit to where people are directing you as your fans, people speak loudest with their wallets, and so that's really where you have to, take a marker of what's happening there. So, but yeah, I think that's great. I think you really were creative with that, and you definitely didn't let it just be a single release,
Yeah, for sure. It was it's definitely been a really fun campaign to be running. It's been very exciting. There's like always something happening next around the corner. It's keeping not only the band excited, but the fans are really amped up and just like they're getting involved, and the conversations that are happening around this. And this is what's especially important, is the conversations that are happening around this are very much like the band and the fans are experiencing this together, which will make for more successful campaigns in the future. You're kind of creating a feedback loop.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like, and actually, so we can get into the next example if you're cool, because this kind of speaks to that. You ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So this one was actually brought to me, this alternate kind of launch was brought to me by Jesse. He actually pointed it out to me, and he's got this band that he loves called Dirty Projectors. And he was like, yeah, they basically released this box set of vinyl, and there's 5 vinyls. And people who are fans of this band, they know that there's like, I think there's 3 backup singers and 2 lead singers. I'm not a fan of this band, so if I say something that's wrong, Jack, feel free to correct me, because you're familiar with them, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just be like, no, it's actually at least
to some extent.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So anyway, but as far as I know, there's like 2 lead singers and 3 like, accessory singers, but who are definitely like in the group. And so they're releasing these 5 EPs that are all going to add up to an album, which I think is really clever. And actually, Hayley Williams has done that over her past release as well. She had 3 EPs, and they all culminated into the Petals for Armor album. And I've seen that strategy being used lately, and I kind of wish that maybe I'd have done that with mine instead of singles, because the singles are exhausting. Although with Hayley's, she did singles, and then those culminated into EPs, and then those EPs culminated into an album.
It's a Russian dolls of releases.
Oh my gosh, it really is. And so that's just the way a lot of people are doing it. But what's amazing about that kind of strategy is that it generates buzz, and it gives you an opportunity not just for your warm audience to like be excited and continuously have stuff coming at them, but it also allows you to keep using this content to find new people before there's like the full on delivery. They can still come in when they feel like they're a part of the process of this release cycle, which I think is just brilliant, So Dirty Projectors, back to them. They put out a box set, and it's a pre-order. So there's going to be 5 EPs that are all this vinyl, and they're going to basically be releasing these EPs digitally over the next several months. And I think the pre-order is for vinyls that'll ship in December, like just before the holidays. So they essentially, and then they said each of these, EPs are a different one of these singers, because there's 5 people in the band who sing at some point. So each one is going to feature like one of those 5 as the lead singer, so, kind of on those tracks. And I think what's also really clever, so there's a facet to that, right? Also on like the sale or the product page for this, they have like the vinyls of the things that have already released, and the other 3 covers are blank, and not blank like just a plain white block. It's obvious that they are going to be taking pictures of these people on some kind of art gallery type of background, and they're going to be very, they're going to work together on a branding perspective. But like the art isn't complete. It's kind of there, but it's not complete on all of these different vinyl, covers. So I just thought that was really clever, because they can use these EPs as these release. They basically have the next 6 months to allow people to discover them, get excited enough where they would want to pre-order this limited box set of vinyl. And that's something that fits their audience very, very well. But they're giving themselves all of this time. And so like when you look at this kind of structure, why would you crowdfund? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. If this is the way that musicians are operating now, and that music fans are used to experiencing, even the decision-making process for buying a product, like this is crowdfunding. And we've talked about this kind of on the podcast before. Obviously it doesn't, crowdfund. If you haven't recorded anything, right, there are some circumstances where you might have to get your FitFund on or find other funding to do this kind of thing. But I've said plenty of times, like, just ask people if they would want this. And if they're like, yeah, then be like, okay, here's a link to pre-order that product. And I'm only going to make this many, and they're going to start shipping in 30 days from now or whatever. And that can fund your order so that you don't have to front a bunch of cash and have a bunch of inventory for things you don't end up selling, So I thought that was a really cool kind of alternate way to launch, as you say, Jack, these Russian doll release kind of things. But also, again, bringing around that idea of, okay, this, if someone's never heard of us before and we, promote this particular EP and someone's really identifying with it, we have all of this time to convince them that this product or this album is cool. And really let them get to the point where they would be an Ascension purchaser, that kind of profile. And I think that's really clever.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I'm actually really curious to see how they continue to run this kind of marketing campaign over the course of the rest of the year. And sort of looking, from a high level, okay, what are they doing to attract new people? What are they doing to make those people get into it? Are they working any kind of angles for, building up their list? Are they running giveaways? I'm really curious to see how they do that, because I think the concept that they're running with, the structure as a whole, is super cool. And like you were saying, it again kind of can span the full spectrum of the buddy system, which is awesome.
Right. Yeah. And that's, in that way, it's very similar but different to the Ultimate Album launch, where we're trying to move people through multiple phases, in kind of in one fell swoop. But this is a little bit elongated time-wise, compared to that. So I think that's a good way that you could kind of tweak it, right? And get people invested in the music before you're even really asking them for anything.
Yeah, for sure. I think the branding of the Dirty Projectors release is super cool, so definitely check that out. Take a look at what it all looks like, because I think and I think we talked about this a little bit on last week's episode and the previous week's episode about how your launches and any of your offers that you're making need to really tie in a heavy amount of creativity, and I think they did such a kick-ass job of doing that.
Right. Yeah, and I think all the vinyls have a certain color scheme, and they're definitely, and that can be an expensive product for an indie, obviously, 5 vinyl, the way it is, you could, I don't know. I think that there's just a lot of costs associated with that, which is why it's,
for sure,
it's priced to reflect that, especially if you're not going to be doing the volume that a band like that's doing. The cost gets really high at that point. But I just definitely think it's a cool product. And so if you get to a point where that kind of product makes sense and you have enough purchasers that you think this is a viable product for, all of those little caveats attached, I think it's definitely very, very cool. We should totally go scope out their Facebook ads library and make sure that their label is doing good work for them, because I think it's a really clever kind of campaign. But are they doing all the things?
Just a little bit of funnel hacking to find out.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that definitely inspired me and got me thinking a lot about, even the stuff that I'm releasing right now and how that's going. I thought it was very, very cool to see. And if we want to know what's happening with them in the future, I'm sure Jesse will know. He's a huge fan. So, maybe we'll have him on to talk about it later.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Maybe we can do a recap when we see it wind down in December.
I'm totally for that. All right. So do you have another example, Jack, you want to share?
I do have another example. And this is a pretty interesting one. And it kind of goes into the idea of where your launches are placed. Because in the Ultimate Album launch, for example, we talk about, nesting your launch over the period of a few days with behind the scenes content and things like that, if you're familiar with the Ultimate Album launch strategy, and hosting that in places where only people who are going through the experience can consume them. But that doesn't always have to be the case. And this kind of alternate launch that I'm going to go into here kind of illustrates that a little bit. So what we did was, for one of our artists back in the summertime, a rapper, he was releasing a record, and it was kind of dropping pretty quickly. The project sort of came together fast, and he wanted to do kind of like a a quick release. So what we ended up doing was, rather than running a strategy like that, which involved like would involve a heavy amount of tech build, and quite a bit of lead up to make it happen, we went with a kind of an alternate approach where we premiered the album in a live stream. And you see artists do this kind of thing quite often. But the way he did it was pretty cool. We invited his fans to a live stream on Facebook, about a week ahead of time. We started running some traffic to an event responses page. We ran some traffic into ManyChat so that we could hit people back up and let them know when the album was going to drop in the live stream. So we generated some subscribers and some interest that way. And then we brought people into this live stream where he played through the record song by song with his fans, he had all of his friends in a room with him. And they were just hanging out with the fans, doing Q&A, and going through the songs one by one. And it just looked like a party. It looked like a lot of fun. And he had a ton of his fans. He has a big warm audience, but he had a ton of his fans join in for this. And then what we did during that launch was we had a special offer going on during it where he was signing copies of the record and doing a free plus shipping and handling funnel.
Cool.
Which was pretty dope. And he had some upsells baked into that for some merch. And I think we included a previous version of an older album as well. And so some physical merch happening there in addition to the signed CD for free plus shipping and handling. And just in the 45 minutes to an hour or so, I think we generated around $5,000 in revenue just from running that offer on this live stream. Wow. Yeah, so it was really cool. And it was amazing to be able to watch it happen in real time. So that was super cool. So that was the initial part of this launch. The channel was, his warm audience that are on this live stream. So that was kind of part one. And then what he did with that was throughout the rest of that week, he dropped a new video each and every day for each of the singles, or for each of the songs rather. He dropped a video for each one every day for 10 days on Facebook and on YouTube. So he had those going kind of just to support the release. And then we ran traffic on those, and we ran some more traffic into his free plus shipping and handling funnel for a few more days. And then we started running direct sales ads. So we had a pretty large mix of things going, and that kind of campaign spanned a few weeks just with, between the content drops and the subsequent ad campaigns related to them. So that was kind of an alternate kind of launch, definitely different. And it made it really experiential, pretty engaging with the fans. It made a big splash in terms of revenue, which was nice. It was a pretty solid spike within, an hour's time. So it was a really cool campaign to run.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, if we could pivot for a moment, because we love talking about pivots.
Yeah.
I think what really is illustrated here, especially with Jack's examples, and we have a little bit more insight, obviously, because Jack is the guy who's doing these things, whereas like with Dirty Projectors, we don't know what they're doing, right? We'll see if we can funnel hack it and find out. But in the meantime, what does this all mean? Like, okay, there are multiple launches, there are multiple ways to do this. I get it. So, I think the biggest thing that we can really glean from Jack's brain right now is, how do you plan, like with the first band, for example, how do you plan all this? Like, what is the best way to organize? Like, how did you make the decisions you made? Like, what does the preparation for something like that look like?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's kind of twofold. Like I mentioned, one, and this goes for any kind of offer you're making, whether it's a launch offer, whether it's a different kind of product, whether it's a music launch or a product launch, whether it's a permission offer, whatever it might be. There's kind of two things that I look at. One is I look at audiences. I evaluate your traffic sources. I would say, take a high-level overview of your fan base and see where do you have people? Where are people paying attention to you? What stage of awareness are they at? Kind of look at the full scope of the buddy system and say, well, how many people do I have in all of these places? What do my retargetable audiences look like? What does my list look like? What do my Facebook group what does that look like? What's my customer list looking like? Kind of looking at that and saying to yourself, well, all right, what can I glean about those people right now? And saying, what could I do for people in those particular stages? How could I specifically speak to them in this launch? So that's kind of part one. And then part two is saying, what kind of assets do I have on hand for this, and what might I need to create? So if it's a single, for example, you've obviously got the song, but do you have content related to it? Do you have a music video? Do you have a piece of merch, or could you create a piece of merch? Looking at all of that sort of stuff. Do you have behind the scenes content as far as like digital assets go? Looking at those two things are kind of like the first point in planning. And then what I like to do is just, like you were saying on a previous episode, is kind of reverse program the journey for these fans at different stages. What would someone be into? For example, for the first band we talked about, we looked at signups as far as the giveaway goes, and we said, what would people want to sign up for? Like, what would be a cool offer? We're already offering them. Actually, this is an interesting kind of side note. We're already offering a limited edition t-shirt that's for sale related to the single. So we don't want to be giving that away. We need something else. So how can we specifically speak to a subset of fans that are going to be interested in a giveaway? And how can we speak to them in a way that's different from how we're speaking in sales offers? How can we make that different? So rant over. I think where I'm going with this is, from a strategy perspective, I look at, if you have ideas of the journey that you'd like to map out related to your launch, whether that be, the drop of a song and the drop of a video, or whether that be inclusive of a giveaway or a sales offer or whatever else your creative brain can cook up, I think looking at the fans at those varying stages of your buddy system and saying, how can I position these different pieces of the campaign to speak to those people, and what do I have to do that? So I realize that that's like highly conceptual, but when you're planning a strategy, you are being highly conceptual. You have to be.
So, when you're building out these campaigns, obviously you said you're looking at the audiences. So, where are you looking at, like, okay, there's this in this audience and this audience. There's no clear bottleneck, but we still want to be moving people from here to here. And then like constructing something that fills that gap? Or are you thinking more about what are things that are cool, and then like verifying you're smart by looking at the audiences to see where to insert them?
I think oftentimes, and this is just the nature of working with an artist and not necessarily putting myself in the shoe, not necessarily being the artist in the shoes of the campaign, but it's about talking with the artist, or, thinking for yourself about like, what's cool, what's cool in your mind, what would you want to do, what would be cool for your fans. And then, like you said, reverse engineering it and fitting it in based on these stages, based on where your fans are at and how you'd like to move them.
I think that that's some great fuel for the fire. I think if indies, and that's one thing that we kind of talk about a lot. And I know some of you are really good about like funnel hacking and taking a look, because I see you in my email.
Don't think we're not watching.
On my website. Yeah. Oh, seriously. But that said, there are a lot of great artists out there doing some really cool things. So, and obviously, we can't disclose our own clients' identities, and that's, just because we have to respect their privacy, unless they, want you to go look at their stuff. But, you can, anytime that you see something cool, we're like, okay, what is this artist doing? I think that's one thing that has been helpful for me when I'm developing out campaigns. I go to, an artist I respect that's going through a release, or even if they're just releasing merch, and I'll look at the offer, I'll look at the stuff they're doing. I'm like, that's really cool. And then I will like think about, okay, if I were doing that, what are the things that I would do to promote it that they aren't doing? And it's almost, again, like we've talked about this before, sometimes it's easier to work backwards, right? Think about the result and then think about how we get there. And I think that there's a lot of great artists, who are on major labels and have, offers going out and merch going out all the time. But, we don't think necessarily that their management or label or whoever is doing a great job promoting them. And I think it could spur some creativity in an indie to be like, okay, if I were a person who was doing this, right, even though I'm not there right now, if I had to construct what would happen up to this point, like if I were the marketing manager for this artist and I were going to outline what it looked like, it's just brainstorming, right? Because you never really, I don't think anyone really understands how valuable that is to do it in the hypothetical and then see how that translates and actually motivates you within your own stuff in real life.
Yeah.
And so, don't funnel hack me, but go funnel hack people who are like famous or funnel hack people you respect, because I think that that'll really help you start thinking about, okay, what are the alternate ways? Like, I know the Indepreneur game. I know what I've learned from this training. I know what Creative Juice has taught me. And I've got all of this information, but I don't necessarily have an idea of what I want to do with it yet. Go swipe, go find people who are doing cool things and then build that infrastructure as if it were yours. Because a lot of that will end up coming over into your stuff pretty seamlessly.
Yeah, for sure. I think like there's so much inspo out there. There's artists that are doing really creative things, and you mentioned major label artists or even indie label artists, and how we could poke at marketing teams and say they're not taking full advantage of what they could. Well, if you can get inspo from what another artist is doing and then take it to that next level, then you filled the gap. So do it. So do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Sometimes it's easier to fill. It's almost like, you can, and we deal with this, I think, as humans all the time, where it's like, I see my friend, they're doing this thing, they're totally fucking up. Like, they should have just done this instead, or they should just do this instead. And we keep it to ourselves, right? Because nobody likes that friend unless they're like doing something dangerous. Oh my gosh, I went in a whole nother thing here. Hang with me.
Here we go. Strap in.
It's strap in, but it's really easy to identify where someone else is doing something wrong, right? We also, as humans, tend to see qualities that we don't like about ourselves in other people. Mm-hmm. So, those are the things that's why it's especially good to like go look at other people. And not so that you can judge them, but so that you can kind of take the idea that you're like, okay, I know that I'm probably going to notice things that I myself have not executed. I know that there are going to be things that I, can kind of commiserate with, but will also be judgmental about it, because when you start getting judgmental on someone, chances are it may be because you are also missing that little piece. And it helps you self-identify, what those things are that you could be developing.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, there's a little bit of human psychology in every episode of Creative Juice. I do not have a degree in that, so take that very lightly.
Just here to get inside people's minds. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, so that's our episode for this week. Next episode, we're going to be talking about basically the plight of advertising, right? And I know that on this podcast, we are like, get over yourself and do the thing and build stuff and get your fit font on and don't worry about being salesy. And, and we do say that a lot, but I think for me as an artist, I totally hear the struggle, right? And I know, especially from earlier in my career, how hard it can be to like put yourself out there and feel like you're making sales and feel like you're doing enough, but not too much. And where's the line? And so next week, we're going to talk about exactly that, the musician's plight with advertising, basically how to overcome some of those feelings and maybe some strategies you can use in order to do that a little bit more comfortably. So I'm excited for that episode.
So am I. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. So that's it for this week, but we'll see you next week on Creative Juice.
Thanks, Indies.
East Coast, West Coast,